So I won't explain why the rationalist view of man of the world, this materialist view of man of the world, led to loneliness, but just assume that it is the case. So we could see the last 200 years that more and more people started to feel lonely. And just before the corona crisis, loneliness peaked. Like up to 60% of the people worldwide reported to feel lonely and only connect to other people through the internet. And the UK, Theresa May appointed a minister of loneliness because she acknowledged that many people felt lonely. And then the United States, the US Surgeon General, reported that there was a loneliness epidemic. So, and that's crucial. As soon as people feel lonely, they will start to be confronted with lack of meaning making. Okay? They will. And you see that, for instance, in the fact that before the corona crisis, up to 60% of the people reported that they considered their own job to be a so-called bullshit job, a job without any meaning or purpose. When many people feel like that, and the entire society is saturated with this freely floating anxiety, something very typical might happen. If under these conditions, someone distributes a narrative through the mass media, indicating an object of anxiety and providing a strategy to deal with that object of anxiety, for instance, lockdowns to deal with a dangerous virus, if someone provides such a narrative indicating an object of anxiety and a strategy to deal with that object of anxiety, all this freely floating anxiety might at once connect to the object of anxiety, because that's something our psychological system does in a spontaneous way, because in that way, without knowing it, we feel in control again, because if we are anxious, without knowing what we feel anxious for, we feel completely out of control, and we are always looking for narratives which indicate an object of anxiety and provide a strategy to deal with the object of anxiety. So that's the first step of the formation of a mass formation. They have been feeling that their life was without purpose for a long time, and they suddenly have the feeling that they are connected again and have the feeling that their life has a new purpose. So that is what actually happens in the formation of a mass. People who are all sitting isolated in their own living rooms, being infused by propaganda and narratives and mental representations through the mass media, well, these lonely masses emerge exactly at the moment of extreme individualism. First you have extreme individualism, and then suddenly people lapse into the opposite, like extreme collectivism. That's what happens in a mass formation. First extreme individualism, many people felt lonely, and isolation, then extreme collectivism.
How is that possible that a small amount of society could then cause this radical change?
The largest group in society usually dominates society. And what is so characteristic of totalitarianism is that it is dominated by a relatively small 20 to 30% group, but which has a very extreme cohesion, which all thinks the same, has the same ideal images, is in the grip of the same propaganda. It is a group that is formed not because people connect to each other, but because people all connect to the same collective ideal, meaning that, or the same collective narrative, the same collective ideology. And then 60 to 65% of the people, sometimes even more, get so scared of this group, they know that there is something wrong with this narrative, but they just prefer to remain silent. And then there is an even smaller group who actually chooses to speak out, and then that group is just crucial. That group usually is between 1 and 10%, somewhere in between, and this group is just crucial, because if you want to know what you can do against mass formation and emerging totalitarianism, then you really have to understand the mechanism, even beyond what I explained. Like, this mother went on the scaffold, hung the noose around the neck of her son, and when he died, she was very proud to receive a medal for being a heroine for what she did. That is the dramatic end stage of a mass formation, where all the love between people is sucked away and all injected in the bond with the collective. So once you understand that, you understand something very important. Mass formation is mass hypnosis. And at the end stage of the hypnosis, people become so convinced of the hypnotizing narrative that they are willing to eliminate everyone who doesn't go along with that narrative. And the hypnosis is produced by the voice of the hypnotist, namely the propagandist. And if there is no one else who speaks out during a mass summation, then the mass hypnosis will almost always go to the last stage, where people start to be so much in the grip of the mass formation that they are willing to kill and eliminate everyone. So that means that this small group of people who are willing to speak out absolutely should do it. Gustave Le Bon described that already in the 19th century. He said, this small group of people will never be capable of waking up the masses, usually not. But that doesn't mean that their words have no effect. If they continue to speak out, they will constantly disturb the hypnosis and prevent it from going to the last stage, and make sure that the masses do not arrive at the ultimate stage, where they start to be convinced that they have to eliminate everyone. So it's just crucial, no matter from what perspective you observe the phenomenon of mass formation and emerging totalitarianism, continue to speak out. That's what history has shown us time and time again. If the people who do not go along with the system stop to speak out, the cruelty starts.
Tell me more then about that kind of empathy we could have for the other, because I think it's very tempting for anyone who's spoken out during one of these times of crisis and feels themselves to have paid the price for speaking out, that you want to damn those who were part of the herd. Can actually that vision of this as more of a state of hypnosis, herd mentality, give us a bit more empathy and grace to those who have taken part in what might be, in the case of coronavirus, absolutely horrendous crimes? How can we think about those people in a more gracious way when we understand really what's going on in the psychology behind it?
The theory on mass summation can help people to consider the other people who did go along, who did buy into the narrative to be human beings. Some people are really capable of going to the last stage of the mass summation, where they really start to dehumanize everyone who doesn't go along with them. So, and then we have something very important here. Like in a mass formation or in an emerging totalitarian system, what happens is that people lose all ethical awareness. They lose all ethical awareness and they are dehumanizing. So, the only resistance against totalitarianism is to do exactly the opposite. That is something that Solzhenitsyn, for instance, describes in a very evocative way in his book The Gulag Archipelago, where he describes how he lived in the gulags under Stalin for 15 years, I think. And what he describes is the following. The only resistance against mass formation and totalitarianism, against this radical dehumanization of society, is to stay loyal to ethical principles and to humanity yourself. So that means that you do not react in the same way. If people treat you in an inhumane way, if people don't want to listen to you anymore, if people believe you are crazy, if people believe that you are a danger for society, if people believe that you should be excommunicated, then you have to react, at least that is what I believe, in exactly the opposite way. You have to say, okay, maybe you don't want to listen to me, but I will try to listen to you. And for me, you are still a human being. It's perfectly human to become inhumane, strangely enough. So that's the point. We should always, while the world dehumanizes, the only remedy is to be the one who stays loyal to ethical principles, him or herself. That's what Solzhenitsyn describes in such a beautiful way. Stay loyal to ethical principles in the first place. The ethical principle that every human being has the duty to articulate the words that seem sincere and honest at that moment. So that's the point, I think. Institutionalized religion, definitely in our times, combined with the kind of technology we have, the kind of mass media we have, would probably also give rise to mass summation. So I believe rather that what we have to rediscover is the seminal, the original religious experience, this awareness from this feeling of unity.
That kind of empathy.
And it's that original experience, that original, seminal, religious and scientific experience, which we should rediscover and which we should make the center of a new way of living together.